Hello guys, welcome here to our special edition of Out of Turn 4, the Indianapolis 500 special. I'm Brian here. Coming up on the show, we're going to discuss some of the news that has come out during Indy 500 week. Of course, a lot of it is silly season news for Indycar. Of course, this whole episode will focus on Indycar, that's for sure. Excuse me. All the other news will wait until Tuesday when we return with our normal episode. But of course, we will also play Contenders or Pretenders, a game Zach and I played last year, where I will go from the 33rd starting position all the way down, or all the way up to the pole, to determine who I think will be a contender or a pretender in Sunday's race. And then, of course, I will cap it off with my race prediction for the Indianapolis 500. But we begin with recapping the weeks leading up to the Indianapolis 500. And of course, we start with the Veterans Oval practice. And of course, Scott Dixon topped the field in that practice with the speed of 227.119 miles an hour. He was the fastest over Marcus Ericsson, and Sage Karam was third in that practice. Of course, keep in mind, I believe there were toes, no toes, I don't know for sure, but that was the first practice that day. And then, of course, all cars took to the track after that, and Takuma Sato came out on top with a almost 229 mile an hour lap, I should say. And Jimmy Johnson cracked the top three. Of course, there's a lot of pressure around Jimmy Johnson being his first Indianapolis 500. A lot of media hype being the former 7-time champion. Of course, that was day number 1. Day number 2 was canceled due to rain in the forecast. So unfortunately, the cars did not take to the track day 2. But day 3, they did take to the track, and Takuma Sato once again was the quickest with a 227.519 mile an hour lap. He led over Scott Dixon and his teammate David Malucas. J.R. Hildebrand came home in 4th. Jimmy Johnson rounded out your top 5 in that practice. Then, of course, there was Fast Friday, and Takuma Sato once again at the top of the boards over Indy 500 winner Alexander Rossi and Pato O'Ward, as well as Marcus Ericsson and Scott Dixon. And that was the first practice they really topped speeds of 232 miles an hour. But boy, I will tell you, some of the stuff we've seen come out of Indy this week has been crazy, and it starts with practice 6. Ed Carpenter, no surprise here. He was the quickest in the practice before qualifying, 234.410 miles an hour. Of course, then it was Scott Dixon and Jimmy Johnson rounding out the top 3. Pablo and Callum Islet was 5th. That's a shocker because, again, he's from a Formula 1 background, not very familiar with the ovals just yet, but he did round out the top 5. Now, of course, then we go into day 1 of qualifying, which, by the way, was cut short due to rain, but Rinus VK was fastest. And actually, I forgot something. We'll go back, of course. Connor Daly hit the record top speed at Indianapolis ever with a speed of 244.4 miles an hour. Unbelievably fast speed. And of course, it's no surprise that it was an Ed Carpenter car that did that. They always bring such fast cars. Of course, we'll discuss a little bit more later in our show. Sorry, I'm trying to unlock my phone. Day 1 of qualifying was cut short due to the rain and the thunderstorms later in the day. But Rinus VK, Pato O'Ward, let me go to the top 12 here. So, of course, Rinus VK was quickest, I believe. But he joined Scott Dixon, Alex Plow, Marcus Ericsson, Ed Carpenter, Tony Kanaan, Pato Award, Felix Rosenquist, Romain Grosjean, Takuma Sato, Will Power, and Jimmie Johnson all in the round of 12. And of course, mind you, all 5 Ganassi cars advanced to the round of 12, or the Fast 12. Will Power was the only Penske to advance to the Fast 12, which was really shocking. And of course, keep in mind this is the first year that IndyCar has done the Fast 12 in Indianapolis. It's normally the Fast 9 and then the last row shootout on Sunday. But this time around they did Fast 12 and the Fast 6. There weren't enough cars to do the last row shootout this time. Of course, advancing to the round of 6 was Scott Dixon, Rinus VeeKay, Alex Palou, Marcus Ericsson, Ed Carpenter, and Tony Kanaan. Jimmie Johnson came close to the wall in his round of 12 lap. And, man, he got lucky not to hit it. That was a shocker, but he still will start on the outside of the 4th row on Sunday, so it won't be too bad for him. Then, of course, the Firestone Fast 6 rounded out qualifying after a little bit of a cool down, and Scott Dixon claimed the pole with the second ever fastest lap at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Oval, with a 234.046 mile an hour lap. Then it was Alex Palou. He will be joining him on the front row in the middle, and Rinus VeeKay will join them on the outside front row. Ed Carpenter, Marcus Ericsson, and Tony Kanaan, in that order, will make up row number 2. So far, then of course we go into the practices afterward, and there's only been one that happened before we recorded this episode, but Alex Palou was the quickest with a 229.441 mile an hour lap. So lap speeds kind of went down in practice 8, as I assume they would, because they are going into race trim now for the Indianapolis 500. And of course, with that, let's give our thoughts here. So of course, I got to tell you, the Fast 12, the Fast 6 were so exciting to watch on Sunday. Qualifying on Saturday up until the rain looked like it was pretty exciting. I will tell you though, the heat and that, keep in mind, they sealed the surface before the Indianapolis 500, and it's clear that sealant retained heat very well, which is not good. It was not grippy at all, and you could tell these cars were just on the edge. I mean, Romain Grosjean almost drilled the wall. Jimmie Johnson practically drilled the wall. Will Power, I mean, there were guys all across the board coming out of 2 or coming out of 1 and almost drilling that outside wall. And it's just remarkable how they haven't. There's only been one big crash, and that was Dalton Kellett, I believe, on Monday. So unfortunately, he'll be going to a backup car. But boy, wrecks that could have happened on Saturday are just remarkable how they didn't. So again, I think honestly this qualifying was one of the most fun to watch in, I wouldn't say in a while. I mean, obviously the last row shootout, I mean, Indy nailed it. Let me just put it that way. Indianapolis nailed it this week with qualifying, with the practices, as usual. I mean, you know, obviously they should have more practices. I know some have vouched for it, but, you know, for what it's worth, it wasn't a bad show for them these last few weeks. But now we're on to the news. And of course, the big news is Jimmie Johnson announced to the media today. Of course, today was media day at Indianapolis, or Thursday. Thursday was media day at Indianapolis. Jimmie Johnson announced he is interested in running the double in 2023. And for those who are not familiar with the double is running the Indianapolis 500 at the beginning of the day and then flying to Charlotte to run the Coca-Cola 600 at night. Now, of course, keep in mind, Jimmie Johnson retired from NASCAR at the end of the 2020 season. But and Jimmy Johnson has said he hopes that a deal will fall into place to where he can do that. Of course, he would join the likes of Kurt Busch, Robbie Gordon, and Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart is the only one to compete all 1,100 miles. But, you know, ultimately, I think this would be good, not just for NASCAR, but for IndyCar. And again, we haven't seen anybody run the double since Kurt Busch. I think it would be very exciting to watch somebody run the double, and especially with the stature of Jimmy Johnson. Again, 7-time NASCAR champion. Could we be saying Indianapolis 500 winner after Sunday? We don't know. Okay? That's the possibility, and that's the likelihood that we face entering this weekend, that he could be the Indianapolis 500 champion. I'm not making my pick by saying that, but seeing his speed, it's a possibility. Just throwing it out there. But again, keep in mind he's said as well that he would only run for Hendrick. So this is a little bit of a toss-up now, because again, Hendrick has 4 cars in the NASCAR Cup Series. They can't run a 5th car for any circumstance, and NASCAR won't allow them to do it. Junior Motorsports, again, Rick Hendrick has a hand in Junior Motorsports, so they can't even prep a car for Jimmy Johnson and field it, even though I think that would be BS, because Denny Hamlin does that and drives for Joe Gibbs. But again, Joe Gibbs doesn't have minority ownership in 2311. Then, of course, so what I would likely see is the possibility is that Spire would let him drive the number 77. Assuming things stay the way they are, I think Spire's going to be the only option for Jimmy Johnson to run the Coca-Cola 600 the same day as the Indianapolis 500. And I think they might change his number to like 84 or something, because of course Alex Bowman drives the 48 car. So again, that's something I can foresee happening, is that it would be with Spire. I don't see any other team that would be able to, unless Project 91 fields and Team Trackhouse fields a car for him. I just don't see there being any other possibilities. But again, I think it would be cool to see someone with Jimmy Johnson's stature attempt the double. Of course, we've had Tony Stewart and Robbie Gordon and Kurt Busch do it, most notably in the past. We know Kyle Busch also came out this week and said that he had a deal in the 2017 Indy 500, but Joe Gibbs nixed it and kind of just told him, you're not doing it. So, we'll see what happens. You know, of course, we got a full year before we figure anything out about that. But I figure that's important to bring up here on our Indianapolis 500 special. Gainbridge has been announced as the partner for the Indianapolis 500. They, of course, have signed an extension for IndyCar into 2023, as the Indy 500 and IMS have revealed their new logo for the 2023 season. It's good to see Gainbridge staying on board and continuing their investment in the biggest race of the year, and really the biggest race in American motorsports. So I'm glad to see Gainbridge continue that partnership, and, you know, great news there. The other big news, of course, Shell Pennzoil will be replacing Speedway as the official fuel provider for IndyCar starting in 2023. Now, of course, keep in mind there's been a lot about the hybrid engines coming to IndyCar very soon. So, I don't know how this deal's going to work out. Of course, it's not all electric, so they're still going to have to use fuel. But it'll be great to see, and I'm not shocked. I believe Speedway got sold to 7-Eleven, and of course, Penske Entertainment, all of them have deals with Shell Pennzoil. So to be honest, I wasn't surprised really to see that deal at the end of the day. I know, again, 7-Eleven bought out Speedway to my knowledge, so it really didn't come as too much of a shock to me. But that's the news. That's our recap. we're on to our fun game that we like to play for the Indianapolis 500 that we played last year, and I like to call it contender or pretender. And of course, keep in mind, I just want to explain the rules. If I list someone as a contender, I believe that they have a serious shot at improving their position, possibly. But that won't be the main reason why they get listed as a contender. It's because I think that they've shown enough speed, and I think that they have a legitimate chance to win the Indianapolis 500 or put up a podium. They are not my pick to win the race. That is the point. They are people that I think should be serious contenders and serious picks to win the race. If I list them as a pretender, I want to stress before people get mad at me that I don't think that it's not that I don't think they can contend. It's that I don't feel safe saying that they are a contender in the Indianapolis 500, or that they haven't shown me enough to be a contender in the big race on Sunday. It doesn't mean that I don't think they will. It just means that I haven't seen enough yet. So that's all I got to say. Again, I'm not shutting the door on them running well. But we start off in 33rd. Here we go. Stefan Wilson, of course, driving for Dragon Speed and Cruikshank Racing. Of course, I'm going to list them as a pretender. They haven't qualified at all. They lost a lot of track time because this was really a late deal. This was a last-second deal that was put together, and they missed a lot of testing. They missed a lot of, the lead-up before Indy, the open tire tests, all that. Being a late add to the grid in a one-off ride is difficult. It's really difficult to pull off. And, of course, keep in mind this team didn't qualify at all because they had engine issues. So I don't see Stefan Wilson. To be honest, I think Stefan Wilson's in the worst ride he's been in his entire Indy 500 career. So I just don't feel safe saying that he's a contender. I feel like he's the biggest pretender in the whole field. Starting in 32nd is that number 45 for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. That is Jack Harvey. And, of course, I'm going to list him as a pretender as well. To be honest, of all the Honda teams, Jack Harvey and Rahal Letterman Lanigan have been kind of the weakest out of all of them in terms of race speed, in terms of qualifying speed. And Jack Harvey's just struggled since getting in that ride. The lead up to qualifying, he was not quick at all. So, I don't know. I just can't look at him as a contender. Now, I'm looking ahead. He was 23rd quickest after qualifying. That was on Monday's practice. So, ultimately, I just don't see him running up front unless some sort of strategy falls in his favor. Ahead of him, actually next to him, on the final row is Christian Longard, his rookie teammate. And again, kind of the same situation as Jack Harvey. I think he's a pretender as well. He really hasn't shown speed. And to be honest, this is really his second oval ever. I just don't feel that strongly about Christian Longard being able to run at pace on an oval like this. In a big race like this, especially. Now, he might improve his position, but I just don't see him being a big contender, let alone a contender, period. In 30th is the two-time Indianapolis 500 winner, Juan Pablo Montoya. He is driving for Arrow McLaren Schmidt-Peterson in a two-race deal. He ran a few weeks ago in the GMR Grand Prix. Ran pretty well. But to be honest, I'm listing Juan Pablo Montoya, and this is a shocker, as a pretender. I just don't see the speed in him this time around. He's really run nowhere close to the top 15 to this point. But again, compared to the last three we just discussed, I think he's a little bit more of a contender than those three, but he's still a pretender. The plus side is, again, he had good speed. He had almost a great result in the Grand Prix. And, of course, again, running in the Grand Prix, he's gotten accustomed to his pit crew. He's gotten to work with them and his strategist. So there's a little bit of chemistry already built leading up to the race. That's a big plus. And, again, he worked with this team last year as well. Another big plus for him. So, it was a tough one. I don't feel it was a 50-50. I feel like more it was a 65-35 in terms of me listing Juan Pablo as a pretender versus a contender. And again, he would have had a podium in the GMR Grand Prix had it not been for that late wreck. Dalton Kellett, pretender, plain and simple. Do I need to explain it? Again, he could be a dark horse, but he crashed his primary car. He's shown no speed. I don't think I need to go too in-depth on this. Here's going to be the shocker here. In 28th is his teammate, Kyle Kirkwood. Of course, a rookie. Had a very impressive Indy Lights season last year. But I'm going to be honest here when I say this, and you're going to be shocked. He is my first contender on this list. Let me just explain. He's shown top 15 speed most of the week leading up to qualifying. His teammate, J.R. Hildebrand, has been the fastest of the A.J. Foyt cars. And there's no doubt he's also playing the driver coach role like he did last year at A.J. Foyt Racing. And again, Kirkwood's going to Andretti next year, okay? But Kirkwood has always found a way this season, at least to me, to be shocking. He has found a way to kind of break through. And he's really kind of outperforming his equipment. So as much as I would like to list him as a pretender, he's a guy who always outperforms what he runs. So it wouldn't shock me to see him climb early in the race, maybe get toward the top 10 before the end of this. In 27th, the defending winner of the race, as well as the newest member of the four-time Indy 500 club, Indy 500 winner club, Helio Castroneves, and I would be terrible. I would be remiss to not put him in the contender role, regardless of his starting position. Again, defending winner, four-time winner of the race. He's starting far back, but again, he's found his way to the front before. He can do it again. Okay, I think he's a contender, and I think he's a big one at that. Okay, this one I'm a little bit on the fence about. Starting in 26th is Scott Mclaughlin in that number 3, and I have to lean toward pretender. Is this one, again, forgive me, but this was a tough one. I just don't... No, again, inconsistency on the boards this week. He really hasn't been up to par with his two teammates, Will Power and Joseph Newgarden. So I just don't peg him as much of a contender. I do think, like Helio, he can find his way to the front. But again, a lack of experience. Like I said, it was a tough call. I kind of lean toward pretender because, again, how far he's starting back, can he stay composed on his way to the front will be the big question. Colton Herta, he's had a rough week leading up to qualifying. Of course, keep in mind the engine change, but there's a promising sign in that his teammate is starting up front, and that is why I list him as a contender. Again, the engine change, I think, will be the big difference for him. He also won the Grand Prix, a big motivation going into the race, and Andretti always finds race speed, and with Honda up front with CGR right now, it's a perfect storm for Colton Herta. And the same can be said for Helio Castroneves because he's in the Honda camp. But those are the reasons I think we could see Colton Herta at the front by the end. Again, winning the road course a few weeks ago, I think, is a big motivational factor for him. Now, his teammate, starting in 24th, Devlin DeFrancesco, I'm listing him as a pretender. He's kind of in the same boat as Dalton Kellett for me. He's been slow all season. He's struggled, um, and to be honest, he's been the back marker for Andretti all year. I can't list him as a pretender or as a contender in good faith. The same can be said about their other teammate. Yes, there's another Andretti entry, and it is the guy named Marco Andretti. So currently, I have him as a pretender. Again, keep in mind, it's not based on where he's starting because he was impeded by Takuma Sato on his first run. But they do show good race pace. But again, a one-off position. I believe Michael will be the strategist, which is good. So there is chemistry there, obviously, between parent and son. But I just don't see him being as much of a contender as I think. So here we go. 22nd, Sage Karam in the number 24 for Dreyer and Reinbold again. He's been the mainstay there for the last few years. Oh man, I got him listed as a pretender, but he showed speed, so it's another one that's just on the fence. Something always messes him up in qualifying. Now, granted, 22nd's not a bad place to start. But again, compared to his teammate, this is kind of what led me to it. He will be the second Dreyer and Reinbold car at the end of the race. There's no doubt. Unless something drastic happens, I don't see him beating his teammate. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. But I do see Sage Karam moving to the front. Dreyer and Reinbold always put together a great program for Indy, and I could see him moving toward the front before long. Alright, starting in 21st, Graham Rahal for Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan. And believe it or not, he was the fastest of the RLL cars, and he's also a pretender. Again, he's shown decent race pace the last few years. How much does losing Sato hurt him? Because Sato is a two-time Indy 500 winner, and one of them was in a Rahal car. So how much did it hurt the team overall? That remains to be seen. But again, this team so far without Sato has struggled on speed massively. That is the reason why I'm listing Graham Rahal as a pretender. Certainly his presence is missed. This one was another really tough one. But this guy has struggled the last few years. Starting in 20th, Alexander Rossi in the number 27. I gotta list him as a pretender too, and I hate to do it. Let me put it this way again. The only reason I'm listing him as such, he seems like he's just down on his luck lately. He just doesn't seem like Alexander Rossi, the Indy 500 winner, that we all have come to know and love over the last handful of years before his contract extension. He just doesn't seem that way anymore. And the last 2 years, he's been in contention. Now, don't get me wrong, he can be in contention, but pit road has always messed him up the last 2 years. And when pit road messed him up, he didn't respond very well. So, unless they get past these pit road mishaps, that was another one that was just on the fence, and I have to list him as a pretender. Starting in 19th, Callum Ilott, the former F2 driver, I do believe. Pretender. He's been average in that position all month, but he could be a dark horse. He's done well despite his lack of oval experience, so I don't want to necessarily write him off. But he's certainly a pretender in this case. In 18th, and believe it or not, the slowest of this team's group of cars, Connor Daly for Ed Carpenter Racing. I got him as a contender. He to me, is the biggest contender of those that far back. Keep in mind, I believe he led the most laps last year at Indy. ECR always puts together a good program for the Indianapolis 500. So they may not have had the qualifying speed, but they will find the front real quick. And I do peg Connor Daly as a big contender in this race. This one wasn't even close in terms of me deciding pretender or contender. J.R. Hildebrand, the third entry for A.J. Foyt Racing, starting in 17th. I said pretender, but I don't know anymore. That's another 50-50. I'm just going to stick with what I wrote. Again, he's never going to live down the 2011 race where he choked it away hitting the wall out of the final corner. Losing to the late Dan Weldon, of course. But he always has speed at Indy. He's shown it so far. He's been the fastest Foyt car, it seems, by a lot. But again, this was a tough call. I do peg him as a dark horse, and I think he does have a shot at this, especially after running at Texas for the team earlier this year. Ahead of him, another former Indy 500 winner, Simon Pagenov, and he's confident in his car. I'm confident in him. He for sure will be a contender, but again, he's one that I felt was on par with Hildebrand. But again, Elio won with this team last year, and Simon is with Elio again. Is that a sign? And that's the big question as we go into Sunday. We mentioned Dreyer and Reinbold Racing, and starting in 15th is one of the Dreyer and Reinbold cars, the number 23 of Santino Ferrucci. And I got him as a big contender. I feel like the pressure is on him entering this race to be a favorite. Again, he's not shown much speed at certain points, but he's always known to find the front. That is what I have him down as. And 2021, despite being a part-time season for him, I think it's been his best season. He showed consistency. Sure, he didn't get on the podium, but he was top 5, top 10 in every single race he ran in 2021, with the exception of one. So, again, I feel like he's a guy, to me, I feel like has the most pressure entering this race. We know Elio's got the pressure of trying to become a 5-time and separate himself from the other 4 in the club. But to me, in terms of the future of his career, Santino Ferrucci has a lot at stake entering this race. Because, again, he's been part-time. We've heard the analysts say he's a guy who should be a candidate for a full-time ride. And if he can put that car on the podium, let alone win the race, oh man, he's got the eyes of the paddock on him. And I think he does entering this race, especially after the magical run he had last year in a part-time effort with Rahal Letterman Lanigan. Alright, 14th, Joseph Newgarden. I list him as a contender, but he's kind of like Kyle Busch in the Daytona 500. He's a guy who's accomplished a lot in his young career, but an Indy 500 is not one of them at this point. Penske has found speed. They always find speed here. I think this year, maybe could we have a breakthrough for him? We'll see. We move ahead to 13th, and that is rookie David Malucas, the guy who competed with Kyle Kirkwood all last season. And this one was a tough one, but I have to list him as a pretender. Look, he's showing speed, but again, him and the other rookies have been overshadowed by Jimmy Johnson and Romain Grosjean, who are making their first ever starts after coming off some pretty big stages in their racing career or racing resumes. He's had tough results at times, but again, he does have one thing that kind of sets him out. And again, I said the difference maker for Rahal Letterman Lanigan. This is the difference maker for Dale Coyne Racing now. Is it the Takuma Sato effect that could help David Malucas? That's a possibility, but I just don't see him moving up past his current starting position. That is why I list him as a pretender, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does become a contender because of the Takuma Sato effect that I think is out there. All right, we're into the Fast 12 ones, and I start off with Jimmy Johnson. It's tough not to list him as a contender after he's been fast all week. Now, you can argue, well, he's just got hype around him right now because he's the former NASCAR champ, and, you know, if, there's going to be naysayers that say, oh, well, he won the race. They talked about him all month. It was rigged. Well, I wouldn't, I would see both sides of the argument, but he's run well both weeks. He's had Tony Kanaan in the paddock to lean on. He's had Dario Franchitti. He's had Scott Pruitt as his strategist, and he's especially had Scott Dixon. But my big question is, can he put it all together to win, let alone finish on the podium for the Indianapolis 500? Again, he's won 7 championships. He's won 2 Daytona 500s. I think he can live up to the pressure, but I will say this is probably the biggest race of his entire racing career, and I'm pretty sure if I asked him that, he would agree with me. This is the biggest race of his entire career. All right, number 11, Team Penske, Will Power, the only car in the top 12 for Team Penske, and he's a contender always. Former Indy 500 winner. He always shows speeds, and again, he's had a strong start to the season. To me, he's one of the favorites to win this race, just based on the strong start. He hasn't won a race, but he's the points leader entering the day. Takuma Sato, I think, honestly, he's another one. One of those cars that is for sure the car to beat. He's listed as a contender for me. He's been fastest most of the 2 weeks. And minus the hiccup in qualifying, he's been relatively solid. I just don't have anything bad to say about him other than the impeding penalty. All right, in 9th, Romain Grosjean, the highest starting Andretti Autosport car, and I think he's headed backward, so I'm going to list him as a pretender. But let me be clear. This is because, again, he is the fastest of the Andrettis, which is great. But my problem is he's too aggressive for his own good. And he's too aggressive at the wrong points. Is this a race where I think, again, he's going to have to tone it down? He can't run like this at the Indianapolis 500 because he'll get himself killed or he'll get somebody else killed. Okay, so I think this is a race where if he doesn't tone it down, he's going to be in the wall on lap 5. So that's something he needs to consider going into the Indianapolis 500. How's he going to approach it? In 8th, Felix Rosenquist. I got to list him as a pretender too. Again, he's been quick all week. It's no knock on his speed. It's no knock on him as a driver, but it seems like he always struggles on ovals or something happens to go wrong. There's a mishap always with that number 7. That is why he's listed as a pretender. His teammate starts in 7th, Pato O'Ward. He's a contender entering this race. He won at Barber. He's starting to heat up at the right point of the season. And again, his 2 starts at Indy, if you exclude his DNQ from Indy in 2019, he's finished 6th in his first one. He finished 4th in his second. Is this the day where he betters his 4th place finish? I'm leaning toward possibly. 6th place in this one's a shocker to me because I wasn't thinking too highly about this one, but Tony Kanaan, the 5th entry for Chip Ganassi Racing, I'm listing him as a contender as well. Listen, he's been fast all week despite being in a one-off situation. These 2 weeks he's been really quick. Again, though, the issue of my concern is a one-off. Is there going to be hiccups that cost him? There might be. But as far as raw speed, I think he's got it. In 5th, his teammate, Marcus Ericsson. I'm listing him as a contender. He's been just as fast as his teammate, Scott Dixon. And Ganassi is clearly the team to beat entering Sunday. In 4th, the hometown boy, Ed Carpenter. And I'm listing him as a contender as well. Again, they have stuff to build off of based on Connor Daly's run last year. But again, the negative part of it is they always bring great qualifying speed. When they get to the race, though, they struggle. Okay? But could this be the year they finally break through? That's a possibility. And again, I echo that as we head to the front row now and start with Rinus VeeKay. And he's a contender as well. But I think the biggest thing for Rinus VeeKay is that he's matured a lot in the last 2 years. He's really been able to take bigger risks without wrecking his car. I like it. I think he's really matured a lot in this situation, and I feel like he's ready to take on this moment. So we'll see what happens. Now to the final two. Alex Palou kicks it off, the defending series champion. He's also been just as fast as Scott Dixon. And the big thing to remember is Alex Palou is the one who dueled with Helio Castroneves in the later laps of the Indianapolis 500, and until Helio finally just closed the deal. So Alex Palou is honestly one of the big heavy favorites entering this race, and that's why he's listed as a contender, but none more so than the guy who will be the first to see the green flag, and that is the Iceman, Scott Dixon. The fastest most of the 2 weeks, but again, he's had some mishaps, much like Alexander Rossi. He's had some mishaps that have taken him out of a contender position. So will that curse end for him, and will he finally get his second Indianapolis 500? It will remain to be seen. Alright, the moment I think you've all been waiting for, and we are done playing contender or pretender. I hope you guys enjoyed that little game and that little run through of the grid. But now we are on to the race predictions, and we start, well actually there's only one, so we don't start. But anyway, my prediction for the Indianapolis 500, as much as I hope to see Helio get his fifth, and I want to see it happen so bad, but I'm telling you, I'm going to go with Takuma Sato. He's been consistently top 10 all week. He will duel with those Ganassi cars. And again, I just feel this is a race that Takuma Sato can easily win and capture his third, putting him just a step closer to the club. So I'm going to go with Takuma Sato, Rick Ware Racing. They will get the win on one of the biggest stages. Actually, I'm sorry, the biggest stage in American auto racing. That said, we want to thank you for watching this special edition of Out of Turn 4. We hope you liked what you saw. I know it ran a little bit later than our show normally runs. Man, we went on for 45 minutes almost. But again, be sure to tune in this Sunday to Sunday Morning Tinkle. Jason and I will be discussing the NBA playoffs. We will also be discussing the NHL, the Stanley Cup playoffs. Carolina just took the lead in the series against the New York Rangers. So could the Rangers force Game 7? That's one thing we might discuss. We are also going to discuss the OTAs, our predictions for the match coming up on Wednesday, and much more. So you'll want to tune in. It's Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. So we hope to see you then. And then, of course, tune in this Tuesday to Out of Turn 4, our normal show. We will be recapping the Monaco GP, the Coca-Cola 600, and this race, the Indianapolis 500. Again, the Indianapolis 500 coverage kicks off at 11 a.m. Eastern on Peacock and NBC. That's all we got. We want to thank you again. We'll see you on Tuesday. Until then, goodbye, everyone.